From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon, I'm Carissa Cheng with your 12 o'clock news and sports updates. The Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver says September's home sales dropped by 46% compared to September 2021. Home sales dropped 10% from August to September. The BC board says sales in the region totaled 1,687 last month, down from 3,149 the September before and 870 in August. The board's director of economics and data analytics says the lower sales levels could be because of the Bank of Canada increasing interest and mortgage rates. Second doses of monkeypox vaccine will be available in BC starting this week. The Provincial Health Services Authority says those who received their first dose at least 28 days ago are eligible to make an appointment for their second dose. The health authority encourages those who have not received their first dose to get vaccinated. It also says that those who have already had a monkeypox infection do not need a vaccine. Monkeypox spreads through close physical contact with an infected person's lesions, clothing, or bed sheets, and symptoms include rashes, swollen lymph nodes, and fevers. The Public Health Agency of Canada says a total of 1,400 cases of the virus have been confirmed in Canada, including 162 in British Columbia. The Mental Health and Addictions Ministry has announced changes to vital support programs. Our reporter Kyle Collis has more.
BC has expanded services for people to get mental health and substance use support when leaving one of the 10 provincial correctional centres. 5 community transition teams are being added, making 10 total. The size of these teams will also be increased as they are adding new healthcare and support workers to each. All teams will include social workers, nurses, peer support workers, as well as Indigenous patient navigators. The length of time for people to use these services will be going from 30 to 90 days. Each correctional center will now have a team to support it. Kyle Collis, 1680, The Crow.
We're now joined by our reporter Kyle Collis. Kyle, what exactly does a community transition team do?
Well, their job is to assist mental health patients as they safely get transitioned from correction centers back into their communities.
And how effective have these support teams been in the past?
Since 2019, the original 5 teams have approximately helped 1,500 people get the support that they need.
Thank you, Kyle. A lawyer told the Ontario Superior Court that laws governing prostitution in Canada are creating inequality. The Supreme Court of Canada struck down the prohibition on prostitution in 2013 after lawyers argued that the laws are too broad and put sex workers at risk. The Canadian Alliance for Sex Work Law Reform launched a constitutional challenge, citing that Canada's sex work laws violate the Canadian Charter of Freedoms and Rights. Edmonton police are using DNA phenotyping to find a lead in a 2019 sexual assault case. Detective Colleen Maines says labs in the U.S. are open to helping Canadian police with investigations.
Here in Canada, we are limited somewhat because we do use the RCMP lab, and they have to deal with all of Canada, all of our cases, so it does take time, and they can only do certain things. So, yes, we are lacking with that technology here in Canada.
She adds that this method is a last resort in finding a suspect. The family of victims from Flight 752, which was shot down by Iran's Revolutionary Guard in January 2020, are demanding the Canadian government take a harder line against the regime. People gathered in protest on Parliament Hill today. They praised Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and heckled Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's office says that he is expecting to testify at the Emergencies Act inquiry. The public inquiry will look into the passing of the Federal Emergencies Act during February's Freedom Convoy protests in Ottawa. Hearings will start on October 13th until November. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced a $300 million fund to help the East Coast recover from Storm Fiona. He says the goal is to distribute money through local offices of the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency.
I can tell you Canadians from coast to coast to coast are worried about their fellow Canadians here in Atlantic Canada and will continue to step up and support, because the community support that I've witnessed here on the East Coast gives me not just hope but assurance that everything will be done to build back even stronger.
The fund is meant to help repair and rebuild infrastructure damages over the next 2 years. The number of available jobs in the U.S. has sunk, which may lead to businesses pulling back further on hiring and potentially cool high inflation rates. Reporter Julie Walker with more.
The government says there were 10.1 million advertised jobs on the last day of August, down a huge 10% from openings in July. Layoffs ticked up in August, but remained at historically low levels. That's according to the Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey. The sharp drop in job openings will be welcomed by the Federal Reserve, which is hoping to reduce the demand for workers by raising its key short-term interest rate. On Friday, we get the unemployment rate, which is forecast to remain unchanged at 3.7%. I'm Julie Walker.
A Northeastern University employee who claimed he was injured while opening a package that exploded on campus has been charged with fabricating the incident. Reporter Aaron Katriski has more.
Jason Duhame told Boston police he was injured when a package exploded at the lab where he worked at Northeastern University. Parts of the campus were evacuated that September evening, and there were concerns because a threatening note was found that warned against the dangers of virtual reality and working with Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg. Federal prosecutors say it was all a hoax, and now they've charged Duhame with conveying false information and lying to the FBI. Aaron Katurski, ABC News, New York.
Hockey Canada's board chairs have defended their 2018 sexual assault lawsuit settlement during their hearing with the federal government today. The sport body says that appropriate steps were taken at the time despite widespread criticism. Now moving on to your sports updates. The Blue Jays are getting ready to play their second of a 3-game series against the Baltimore Orioles tonight. The Jays are coming off a big victory last night to clinch the first wildcard playoff spot. The Jays are set to star right-handed pitcher Mitch White, who will face off against Baltimore's Mike Baumann. First pitch is scheduled for 4:05 p.m. Philadelphia Phillies interim manager Rob Thompson leads the team to the first playoff berth since 2011. The Canadian manager took over the team from former manager Joe Girardi earlier in the season. Thompson is the first full-time Canadian manager in the MLB since 1934. The Seattle Mariners are set to kick off a doubleheader matchup against the Detroit Tigers this afternoon. The Mariners are looking for a victory after dropping a 4-3 decision to the Tigers last evening. The first of 2 matchups today is scheduled to start at 3:10 in Seattle. Canada is competing against Turkey in the 2022 FIVB Women's Volleyball World Championships in Poland. Canada is currently ranked 17th in the FIVB rankings. The teams have been divided into 2 pools, with Canada in Pool F with the United States, Serbia, Turkey, Thailand, Poland, Germany, and the Dominican Republic. NFL star Tom Brady and his wife Gisele Bündchen are reportedly hiring divorce lawyers. The couple has been married since February of 2009 and have 2 children together. And now with your weather update, it is currently 19 degrees with cloudy skies. We'll reach a temperature high of 21 degrees later today, but don't expect the clouds to go anywhere. The temperature will drop to 14 degrees tonight. Those were your news and sports updates to 12 o'clock. I'm Carissa Cheng for 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
It's extremely important for people to stay healthy and to stay active as much as possible.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
Hello, you're listening to Companion Call on 1680 The Crow. I'm your host, Gurpreet Kambo, with my producer, Bonnie Chakawa, in the producer's booth over there. We're talking about neurodivergence in the post-secondary setting. I was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder as an adult in university, not at BCIT, somewhere else, but I went back to school to finish a bachelor's degree in my late 20s, after having had a rough time with it when I was younger, multiple goes at post-secondary as an adult. Amanda McKierney is a queer-identifying autistic woman studying at BCIT in environmental public health, and she's also elected as the Vice President, Equity and Sustainability in the BCIT Student Association. And Joanna Angelidis is the Associate Director in the Accessibility Services Department at BCIT. She also previously worked in the public school system. So, I welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So I will start with this. So Amanda, you've made autism and neurodivergence, in some of our previous conversations, I understand it's one of the focuses of your role as VP Equity. Why is that?
During my first year of my program, I actually faced quite a lot of barriers to being able to get an education, per se. There was some bullying from some of the students in my classroom. It could have gone to Human Rights Tribunal. I didn't take it there because everybody in the program is a lot younger than me, and quite frankly, these girls, the frontal cortex isn't quite developed yet, and I don't think that they need a permanent blip on their record when they're still technically children. So I worked with the department to try and come up with a better solution, which basically was bringing in somebody who was able to do a lecture on neurodivergence, because when we go out into the workforce as public health officers, we're going to be working with all types of public. That includes neurodivergent people. And so I thought it would be really important for everybody to learn about it early on and know how to deal with different situations. The problem is the department didn't make this lecture mandatory. They were able to file paperwork to get a grant to cover the cost because apparently it was very expensive. But at the end of the day, the 2 instructors that should have been there and the 5 women who should have been there, or 5 girls, didn't show up. So after that, I didn't really want to come to school anymore. And that's not fair to me. I fought really hard to get here. It took me, like you said, in and out of university, it took me 20 years to finish my first degree. I didn't know I was autistic till I was 33. I got diagnosed after my almost 4-year-old daughter was diagnosed. I had been searching for answers for 3 years at this point. And that gave me the last piece of the puzzle to do more research. And when I started reading about it, I was like, oh my God, this is it. And then I started reading more and I was like, why does this sound like me? Now, my struggles when I was a child were a little different than Anna, because it's a spectrum. You talk to one autistic person, you've talked to one autistic person. You don't know, everybody's different. But I started remembering how I was in school and I didn't have friends and I read at recess instead of playing with the kids, and sometimes I asked questions that other people thought were inappropriate. But it was just curiosity on my part. I didn't realize that what I was saying was not nice. Social interactions were completely foreign to me.
Right. And Joanna, I want to bring you into the conversation here. So, in our conversation, I understand as an administrator that you've also been an advocate for accessibility and for neurodivergent students. Tell us a little about what brings you to this work.
It's such a good question. I think from the time I started my career as a teacher years ago, I started as a high school teacher and then did elementary and so on. I think there's always a part of me that held a deep belief in the inclusion of everyone and in systems, environments that allow for everyone to be themselves.
The atmosphere is definitely changing. It helps when you have a lot of parents who are realizing as their children are being diagnosed that they are also on the spectrum. And so now you've got parents fighting with their kids, not just for their kids. Because at the end of the day, these children are going to grow up to be adults. People who think differently than 10 neurotypical people at the table, then you're getting new ideas for how to do things and new innovations for how to solve problems or create things that are going to make our jobs easier as humans and things that nobody would ever thought about. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Right. And what do you think, Joanna? Like, is this something in the public school system and in the post-secondary system that there's sort of a greater understanding than there was 20 or 30 years ago?
Absolutely, there is. Definitely in the public school system, there's attention to language, language that isn't used any longer. There's attention and priority on reviewing our structures and improving them. But we're not done yet, right? There's still more for us collectively to do.
So much more.
Yeah. I read a book recently, and I can't remember the title of it now, but it talks about the history of public education in Canada. It's called A Class of Their Own. So he talks about
the special needs class, right?
Yes, and he focuses on Ontario, but it's across Canada and across the USA.
We
it's
had them
applicable.
in my school when I was in school.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he talks about, this language is just totally unacceptable, but he talks about students who are deficient. I'm pretty sure that's the word he uses in there.
It's better than the other word.
Right, which was also used. And then he talks about how they built this structure. This is so not he needs to talk about it himself because I'm not going to do it justice. But he talks about how the education system was built, I can't remember the exact year, 1910, 1920. It's built. And then within a few short years, there's recognition that it doesn't work for everybody. But instead of restructuring it at that time, there's this creation of this, these are the students that don't fit because there's something wrong with them, and they go over here.
Well, you got
K to 12.
When you think about why education systems and why school was formed in the first place, in particular, the lower levels of school, it was to basically train kids to grow up and be worker bees, right? So when you have kids in there that aren't learning the same as the other ones, they're probably not going to be worker bees. So you want to hide them.
When we look at where we are, they're like a continuum from this place that was super exclusionary and, quite frankly, discriminatory. We're constantly improving, and it's taking much longer than it should. I'm sure, but we're not there yet. Right?
We're not even close.
Right, exactly. So knowing this here, right, where we came from, I think is super important.
So it's all political, right? I feel like it's not just that a neurodivergent person has a disability because they function differently, right? It's as I mentioned in the introduction, that it feels like this is kind of a growing movement, right? That the society needs to adjust itself.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, we're trying to operate in a world that was not created for how we work.
Right. There's actually a local autism advocacy group called Square Peg Society.
I joined it last week.
Right.
Cool.
What does that mean to you, the phrase square peg?
I don't fit in the standard box. I'm totally okay with that. I own my authenticity now. I'm not masking anymore. It's doing that is exhausting.
What's masking? Tell me about that.
Masking is something that a lot of mostly autistic women do in order to try and fit in. Because, especially for women, when you don't fit in, life is hell, literally hell. I can tell you that growing up with no friends was not fun. Now that I think back, like, I don't have any really long standing relationships with people. They've just kind of floated into my life and then floated out. Like, people have needed me around briefly, but I don't really need anybody. I'm totally cool with being alone.
Is that something that you learned, or is that something that you was inherently a part of your personality?
It's part of my personality. My ex-husband, we went hiking last year, I think. We still go and do stuff with kids, but he and I took our youngest son out for a hike, and I don't like they don't keep up with me. And then he looks at me, he's like, "There you go again." And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "You hang out with people by yourself." He's like, "It was always like that." So I'll go out and do things with people, but I'm doing my own thing beside them, and I don't even notice. But sometimes they do.
What's an example of masking?
I don't know how to describe it. Have you seen it, Joanna?
Totally. I think I have. So like you recognize that a certain way of being is the norm and it's what's accepted. And so because you want to be included, because generally we all do, right? We're social beings, then you will hide something about yourself and conduct yourself in a way that fits that norm better, right? So you'll be accepted, I think. Is that
Thank
fair?
you. Yeah. That basically described it pretty well. I'm not really good at that.
And it's a trauma response, isn't it?
It can be for people who have experienced trauma in childhood. But when you're autistic and you haven't experienced trauma, it's still applicable.
Right. Yeah, and my experience of masking was that it was almost like a brute force response to like certain social situations. It's like you only learned this because of making the same mistake like many times again and again. And that doesn't necessarily mean you understood it. It was just like almost a trial and error kind of thing.
Yep.
It's exhausting too.
It is
right?
totally exhausting.
It's a lot of energy output.
Yeah. And so Joanna, like I understand that you've worked with a lot of like kids and whatnot in the K-12 system, like neurodivergent kids, right? Like, does a lot of this resonate with a lot of the kids that you worked with?
Yeah, I would say it does for sure, right? So, being at school and sometimes recognizing that there are things about you that are different, sometimes not recognizing it. And then being in an environment that without certain things in place or certain adjustments can be very challenging, right? It can be exhausting, and these are things that students have shared with me, or maybe my observations as an adult, or things that parents have shared. So exhausting, but you might not know why, right? You might not know that it's the social interactions that everybody else seemingly goes through and enjoys, but for you might be challenging or more energy output. It could be noise. It could be the lighting. It could be the playground that is challenging, right? Or high schools where you're going in and out. So all these things that, without certain adjustments could actually unintentionally often serve to, limit someone's ability to function happily, calmly, at the very least, but certainly thriving and succeeding at what we should be achieving.
Right.
To add to what Joanna's saying, like, I think back to my childhood and adolescence and stuff, and not knowing that this was a thing. Girls didn't get diagnosed back then, and diagnosing boys was rare. But for me, thinking back to all of the problems I had, if I had known and had some understanding, I wouldn't have dropped out of school at 16. I wouldn't have had to keep trying to go back to finish high school. Graduated as a mature student. I'm super smart, and I wanted to be a doctor.
What a tough thing to sort of think about, to sort of mourn what you think, like, if I'd known before, you know, like what I could have done or like who I could have been. Like, I feel like that's a sort of a mourning process that like a lot of neurodivergent folks go through.
When people uncover stuff about themselves that is particularly concerning or shocking, definitely like feel the feelings. They're valid. And yeah, like we got the short end of the stick, but on the other side of that, it's brought me where I am today, and I'm fighting for this stuff now so that my daughters don't have to do it. Because my 12-year-old, she's going to be graduating in 4.5 years. Holy shit. Sorry. But 4.5 years is like, it goes so fast. You blink and they grow up and they're gone. And like, I have 3 adult children. I don't know how that happened. And my 22-year-old is pretty sure she's autistic. But when I took her to get an assessment 2 years ago from a doctor here who wasn't really good with diagnosing adults, and especially with women, he diagnosed her with borderline personality disorder instead, even though I gave him all this evidence and told him how she was growing up. He was like, nope, I'm not convinced. And I was like, what? Like, are you kidding me right now? And like when I took Anna to a doctor in New Brunswick right after we moved there, this is like, she got seen by somebody here in BC, and then we moved to New Brunswick and got seen by somebody else there. The guy here said, she has a few red flags, but I don't want to diagnose her. Take her to New Brunswick. I showed him pictures of food she bit into shapes and then lined up on the table in patterns. And she took apart a whole roll of toilet paper and laid rows of squares over every surface of the bathroom. It was like the Twilight Zone. And videos of her meltdowns. And this guy looks at all this stuff that I'm showing him, and he says, well, she's pretty quirky, but she's not autistic. She can't be autistic because she's a girl. This kid was almost 4, and she wasn't going to get any help because in New Brunswick, once you start school, there's no help for you. So I phoned Dr. Hilary Cartwright's office. She's one of like the biggest names in like autism research and stuff in New Brunswick, in Fredericton, and her receptionist answered, which she never usually did, and I was just hysterical, and she's like, calm down, and I told her what happened, and she's like, I'll call you back in a few minutes. She called me back. They had a 2-year wait list. She's like, can you come in 4 weeks?
Wow. Because
if Anna didn't get an assessment and didn't get a diagnosis and didn't get a little bit of help before she started school, who knows where she would have been. And they knew that because she was older. They made a space for her. And the relief that I got was just so profound.
Where are we moving towards as a society for neurodivergent folks, and what do you think needs to change?
I think, and I'm being a bit repetitive here, but I think it's all of us orienting from a place of authentic inclusion of everyone. I think that's really critical. And then from that will flow, things like our systemic things, right? And our systems and our procedures and all that kind of stuff will flow from that. So once we're oriented in that way, we'll look at, what are the policies that we need to continue to revise? What policies are missing that we need to have in place? If we look at a post-secondary institution as an example, what is it that instructors are doing already that needs to stay, and what is not being done that would need to be done so that we are living out our commitment to being truly inclusive. I also think, and that's part of that commitment to being truly inclusive, is that the stigma, disappears. That we can all feel comfortable just being our authentic selves, right? And the diversity amongst us. And then I think over the years, we'll start to see, as students go through our systems, we'll start to see more and more diversity in the various places that adults contribute to our communities. I know there's brilliant, bright, wonderful people who are not as successful as they could and should be in our high schools, and maybe don't make it to post-secondary, or they get to post-secondary and then they're not as successful as they can and should be. And then when we look at what that means, in terms of who are our doctors, who are our lawyers, or whatever, right? We need diversity there as well. So I think that is we continue to live out year after year after year this journey to being more deeply and authentically inclusive. We'll start to see that starting to have really good impact for us as we have true diversity in all the things that adults do in a society. And I don't know if I made that point really clearly, but I think if we only have a certain kind of brain or a certain kind of way of thinking or being in all these adult roles that we hold, then that doesn't serve us at all. We need that diversity.
Otherwise, we'd be like robots.
Yeah.
Where's the fun in that?
Right.
And I mean, it's all incremental, right? And I mean, I know that's just the way our society works, but I think a lot of people are going to still go through a lot of trauma while that incremental change happens.
Yeah. Totally. Zero tolerance needs to actually be enforced. Sometimes there's bullying that happens and nobody ever acknowledges that it's really an issue. I still know parents who end up switching their kids' schools because the school isn't taking it seriously. Or my daughter, I love her, holy man, she's 12, and she said there's been a couple of times at school in the last 2 years where she's seen kids get picked on. She's the kid that goes in there and interrupts it. The feeling of being left out, even when you don't really care, because I don't really care, but when they make it when those people make it obvious that you're an issue, it's what the hell?
Any last words from either of you? Last thoughts?
I think that these conversations, or conversations like this, I think are critical. I think hearing the stories, and giving ourselves time to reflect on them and look at what that means for us and what do we change about what we're doing and how we're doing it. I think that's important, right? Conversations like this.
Absolutely. And to go one step further, as the VP of Equity and Sustainability, one of my objectives is actually to get cultural safety and trauma-informed care and neurodiversity training to be implemented into the curriculums here at BCIT. And hopefully beyond that. I have my sights set on actual provincial policy and then national. Because this is ridiculous. We start with education, right? Education changes people. People can't be excluding people that they learn and understand. And I think that that's where we start.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right. Well, thank you to the both of you. And I'm really glad that I could bring the both of you together and have you guys meet each other and talk. It's like having a meeting of the minds about neurodivergence in a sense. So I really appreciate you guys having this, having this very candid conversation here. Thank you for joining me. And that was Joanna Angelidis and Amanda McKierney. My name is Gurpreet Kambo, and my producer in the producer booth over there is Bonnie Chakawa. This is Companion Call on 1680 The Crow.
breastfeeding is for most moms really hard, and it is a very intense period.
Had a really challenging and difficult breastfeeding experience.
Just a special connection you have with your baby.
Ultimately, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. It was harder than giving birth.
You smell him, your breast milk changes, and it makes antibodies. Come on in. Hi, I'm Tessa, owner of Mama Milk Fairy. Welcome to my studio. This is where I make all my precious jewelry. With Mama Milk Fairy, I make breast milk jewelry and breast milk keepsakes. And I started this business to help moms commemorate their breastfeeding journeys. Because breastfeeding is for most moms really hard, and it is a very intense period, and it's something that we would like to have something from once it's over. It's a special time during a mom's life, a special time during a baby's life. So moms, they send me their breast milk in like, I'll try to cover the name a bit, like in a breast milk storage bag like this, and then they put it in some Ziploc bags because I send it by mail, just prevent leaking. And I then preserve it with my special preserving powder, and then it turns out to something like this. I don't know if you're able to see it. Is it like preserved breast milk? Once I've preserved it, I grind it really fine in the mortar and pestle, and I set it in resin, and epoxy resin. And many moms want to add some color, or they would like to add a little shimmer or whatever. Everything is possible, so whatever they want. Or I add a lock of hair from their baby, or dried umbilical cord. And once that's finished, I set it in either solid gold or sterling silver jewelry, setting in a pendant, or in earrings, or a ring. There you go. So pretty. I've put a lot of things in there. The one that recently that I have been asked only once was a single eyelash from a mother's son from her baby, because he has such a beautiful big eyelashes. So she literally gave me one eyelash to work with, and it turned out really well. I have some pictures of it on my social media. It was just one beautiful black eyelash on there.
How hard was it?
Oh, very hard. It made me very nervous, because usually if they give me locks of hair, I have some more hairs to work with, or I can move it around a little bit. And with this, I only had one. Lucas, can you go with Papa? So the main challenge for me was that our oldest son had trouble latching when he was just born. The first few days went very smooth, very easygoing, and then suddenly I started to have troubles with his latch. Well, I didn't know that at the time, but I started to have cracked nipples, and it started to bleed, and up till a point that it hurted so much that I couldn't feed him anymore. Another difficult moment when I was breastfeeding was when I went back to work. I had to start pumping because he went to daycare, and at that time I was working full time, and that was a lot of work, and it was really hard, and I don't know, I think that pumping mothers need more respect.
was Googling breast milk jewelry, and her name came up, or her website came up. Oh. I had a really challenging and difficult breastfeeding experience, and it was just really, really, really hard. But just having something to remind me, of everything that I went through, and I just really wanted some type of keepsake. I mean, I think for me, I know when I opened the jewelry, I still get emotional thinking about it, just because my journey was so challenging and not at all what I had hoped for or anticipated. But I know when I opened the jewelry box, I cried. I just burst into tears, because it just reminded me of how hard I'd worked for something that was so important to me. And it was the way I wanted to mother. I wanted to breastfeed my child, and it didn't totally work the way I wanted it to, but looking at the jewelry, it just really reminded me of it was our experience, even if it wasn't the best experience, but it was our journey between me and my son, and it meant a lot to me to be able to even breastfeed him for the short amount of time that I did. The whole journey feels like it's all wrapped up in one piece of jewelry. And then she also gifted me a small little heart to go with it, which was amazing and such a beautiful surprise. It really meant a lot to me that she did that. So, yeah.
Try to hang in it on your own, and there's a lot of help out there. It's more and more common, and people are supporting breastfeeding now. There are lots of doulas, midwives, lactation specialists that can help. There are a lot of support groups, and you're not alone. So a lot of it's very normal that it doesn't go smooth and easy, and that's okay.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off!
first started playing music with Charlie, specifically punk music. Love punk rock. And then one day we were like, oh, let's go see the Pixies, because they're coming to Vancouver. They're playing with Weezer, another 90s alternative band. Afterwards, Charlie came up to me and was like, dude, like, we should start a band. Like, we should actually try and do music. That'd be so cool. Like, let's do it.
All right, all right, all right, all right, all right. Yeah, why not? All right, this one's called Slap Bye Baby. He said, babe, I want to be in that ass like a parasite. How do you think my touch is what heaven's like? How do you know like they scream when I go for the throat? How do you know what it's like to watch blood pour on my nose?
And so we go through that first quarantine, and it was a search for a drummer, because it was me and Zach on guitar. I was doing most of the singing, Charlie was on bass.
I was learning guitar and Lars was learning all kinds of instruments, so we just kind of messed around. And then it kind of got stale after a while because we couldn't really work off each other in that particular arrangement.
And we were just like desperate for someone who would be able to play drums, and then we'd be good to go, right? And so probably the most musical person in our grade at the time was a certain man named Knight O'Connor, who played guitar, played bass, and played the drums.
So, I mean, I knew everybody from high school. I knew Lars, Zach, and Charlie. And I knew that they were playing music together. And I knew that there was a party coming up that Charlie was throwing. So I went to that. And I managed to corner Lars and Charlie. And I was like, hey, you know, I know how to play drums. And I heard that you guys are down a drummer. I can play drums for you if you'd like that.
We started going, and Knight is a pretty rough drummer. And it was fun, but we were like, okay, this is a good place for this band to start. Like, this will work. We just got to give it time and learn stuff. And we were like, all right, like let's take a little break, right?
And then we figured it out because Knight's a way better bassist than he is a drummer. Lars is a way better drummer than he is a guitarist. I moved to keyboard because I'm much better at that than bass. And Zach stayed on guitar because he's so good.
And then we like played the best I'd ever played up at that point in any group setting ever. Played some of the most fun music, rough and raw, but exciting and new and fun. And we knew we would never go back to the old instruments. From that point on, we were like stuck in those spots. But I'd say our biggest influence was coming from Pink Floyd, because we adored Pink Floyd as the typical high school stoners we were. We loved Pink Floyd, and we'd sit there and listen to Dark Side of the Moon or The Wall and dedicate hours to it and stuff. You know, way more important than schoolwork at the time. You know, you got to get your listens in on some Pink Floyd records, you know. But as to who I would compare us to and who we sound like the most, well, we get a lot of people who say we sound like the Doors.
I've heard from a lot of people that we apparently sound like the Doors in terms of our musical arrangement.
Which is funny because I'm not even that big of a Doors fan. But Charlie's a massive Doors fan, and once again, that's where the Doors got their sound, was through those keys and stuff.
I don't think a lot of people have an answer for Knight's singing. He kind of just sings like Knight, he just shouts. I like it.
As far as genre goes, Lars and I came up with psychedelic funk and punk.
So a lot of bands, whether or not they're a one-hit wonder or whatever, a lot of bands have that song, like the song, their song. It's a song that people say, oh yeah, they sing blank. For Queen, it's probably Bohemian Rhapsody. For Led Zeppelin, you have to say it's Stairway to Heaven. Like Nirvana's It Smells Like Teen Spirit. So if I asked you, what's your song? What's the song for Big Long Baby?
Bugs.
Bugs. Bugs.
Bugs?
But who gives a shit about insects?
I wrote Bugs about drug use, and how it kind of affected me, and how, you know, there's that blasé attitude. I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward. Roaches in my lung, roaches in my heart, kickstart. But it's about drugs, and it's got that kind of like evil feeling to it, you know, about how it's super fast paced, and then it's, you know, you're getting hit with it.
Give a shit about insects. Think you care too much. We don't who takes care of Terraria. Give a shit about insects. Think you care too much.
That was the easiest song we've ever written too. And I think we finished that song in like three like band practices. We actually like completed that song with the words, with everything. Yeah, it was by far the easiest song we've ever written. And the most excited I think we've ever been writing a song. It was very fun to write that one, because we were like, fuck, this is cool.
So I remember playing it, and I just sat there for, must have been like half an hour just trying to work it out. And then I got like the verse chorus down, and then I wrote this like slow, heavy part. And I was like, this is great. So I recorded it and I sent it to the band, and they're like, that's fucking awesome. Yeah, I just really channeled how I was feeling into the words and made a singable melody that still kind of felt punky and had that attitude. And then I brought the words into practice, and then we played it together, and it was done. That was, I think, probably one of the first songs that we sat back and were really proud of.
From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon, I'm Carissa Cheng with your news updates to 1 o'clock. The BC government is proposing new legislation that will supposedly increase consumer protection and guard against money laundering in the real estate sector. The province says that it will improve regulations of mortgage brokers, lenders, and administrators. It also says that it would give BC's financial services sector regulator the power to enforce and set rules. The provincial government says the proposed law is a framework for addressing recommendations by the Cullen Commission, which examines money laundering in the province. The Vancouver police say that 2 people intentionally caused thousands of dollars in damages to the 2010 Olympic cauldron this weekend. The VPD released video footage of the pair coming up to the cauldron briefly, then returning half an hour later with tools to damage the display. The pair also seemed to have taken a video of the act. Constable Jason Duchette says police expect the pair to use the video for bragging rights, and officers hope that when they do, their friends will call the police. The mayor of Burnaby has little to worry about due to his win by acclamation. However, an uncontested win has implications for the future of municipal politics. Shivani Joshi learns more.
Mayor Mike Hurley celebrated his uncontested win for his second term as Burnaby mayor, a first in Burnaby history. Data shows voter turnout has been steadily declining, which can point to the lack of interest in participating in municipal politics. Dr. Stuart Press says that municipal politics matter the most as it impacts issues such as housing, zoning, schools, and more.
There's an irony here that the turnout is lowest for municipal politics, given that the things that affect us most, so much of that is a municipal level decision that lies in the background, and we only notice it when it's really going wrong. And so it would be good for these communities, I think, if there was a concerted effort to try to get more people talking about these issues.
Press says to ease disconnect between politics and voters, there should be a broader effort by City Hall, media, and citizens to show why municipal politics matter. There are still 27 councillors and 12 school board trustees who are running for Burnaby office. Shivani Joshi, 1680 The Crow.
It's Bike to Work Week, and people are being encouraged to use active transportation. Reporter Sylvia Senna has more.
With gas prices on the rise and concerns about climate change, Go By Bike campaign is hoping to educate people on using their bikes. Kathy Acuna is an active rider and explains why she went from car to bike.
I didn't want to have to deal with gas prices, and I'm also worried about climate change, so I purchased an e-bike, and even though the e-bike was a bit expensive, I've definitely saved money by owning it and not having to worry about gas prices. I'm pretty sure that the bike's already paid for itself in the last year I've had it, just based on the cost of gas.
Acuna also believes the Go By Bike campaign is a great way for people to get motivated. She thinks it shows that there are alternative ways to get to work that are better for human health and the environment. Sylvia Senna, 1680 The Crow.
Hockey Canada's Board of Chairs told a Commons committee that they don't think the organization needs to make leadership changes. Sport Minister Pascal St-Onge says committee members of all parties are on the same page.
They're unanimous that the management of the alleged gang rapes and multiple gang rapes was totally inappropriate by Hockey Canada. So there's a total discrepancy between what we're hearing from Canadians, from hockey parents, about the management at Hockey Canada and their own perception of their management.
Interim Chair Andrea Skinner told the committee that the board hears a call for a new perspective and that it is taking steps to change how it communicates. Elon Musk is offering to go through with his original proposal to buy Twitter for $44 billion. Musk said today that he notified Twitter of his plans. Trading in Twitter stock was halted on the New York Stock Exchange for news pending after it jumped nearly 13% to $47.93, which is still well below the price of $54.20 in Musk's original offer. Now on to your weather updates. It is currently 18 degrees with cloudy skies. There will be a temperature high of 21 degrees later today, but don't expect the clouds to go anywhere. The temperature will dip to 14 degrees tonight. That's all for your news updates to 1 o'clock. I'm Carissa Chang for 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.